Andy, I looked over as the Coles were performing, and you weren't there. And I think that's the first time I've ever been in this room, and you haven't been sitting there. So, well, you did go to the bathroom once, but other than that, wow, it was a little disconcerting, I have to say. You know, I do my titles a month or so ahead, a little more than that in this case. And when I came back, Dorian and I were in New York visiting our daughters and came back about a month ago. And as I walked in the door, Dr. Susan told me that Virginia Nelson had made her transition the night before. And so I, at some point later in the next couple of weeks, I started to think, well, gee, should I change the title of the talk today? And the answer immediately was, nah. Because if anybody understood joy, it's Virginia. And so let's have at it. What do we mean by joy? You know, Thomas Troward, who was one of the great influences in New Thought, he was a British judge that served in the Punjab area of India, and that's the part of India that since has become partly Pakistan and partly Northwest India. And he was there for several decades, and while he was there, he began to study some of the Eastern teachings, some of the more esoteric teachings. And he retired and came back to London and began to, after a little bit of writing and so forth, began to speak at the metaphysical societies in London and Edinburgh and a few other places. And he's the one that coined the idea of what he called 7 divine qualities, or 7 qualities of God. And those qualities are peace, power, beauty, joy, love, light, and wisdom. And he said that those qualities are essential to all of creation, that they exist on their own as part of this infinite spirit, this infinite intelligence or mind or God or whatever term you want to use for the creative intelligence of the universe. And that these are not qualities that we need to create. These are qualities that already exist, that are within every aspect of creation, and we each have the capacity to realize them. So we don't need to bring joy into our lives. We need to recognize that in a sense we are joy, and to learn to be able to realize that to maybe a greater extent. It's not the same thing as happiness. Happiness is an experience. Happiness is what we might call in the world of affect. It's something that is the effect of perhaps joy. But happiness is also, if you've noticed, it's kind of fleeting. You know, you may have it for a part of the day, and then somebody cuts you off in traffic, or your cable goes out, and you're sad, right? Or pissed off. As Dr. Ken Gordon calls it, you fall into pissed off-tivity. But joy is something that's much more fundamental, much more an essential element of who we are. And to the degree we understand that, and to the degree we cultivate that, our lives tend to be filled with the various expressions of joy that would include love, that would include being successful, that would include having meaning in your life. There was a recent study that came out in the last month or so that studied health from a relationship to people who describe themselves as happy or sad. And another element they put in, do you feel your life has meaning? And there were some people that felt their life had meaning that were also happy. There were some people that that described themselves as happy that didn't feel their life had meaning. And what they found was that the people that described themselves as happy but their life didn't have meaning had the same health profile as people that were sad. But people that described themselves as their life having meaning, whether they also described themselves as happy or sad, were healthier. Because meaning gave something more to their life. Happiness was something to go after from without, many of them thought. Meaning was something to express from within. Paul Schrader says, what fascinates me are people who want to be one thing, but who believe in a way contradictory to that. Who might say, I want to be happy, but I keep doing things that make me unhappy. Maybe you know someone like that. or you've heard tell about someone like that. You know, I used to be like that. Still am to a certain extent. Occasionally I do things that I would have to classify as stupid. And stupid is different than ignorant. Ignorant is when you don't know better, but stupid is when you know better and you still don't do better, right? Stupid is when you know what you're doing is not good for you, or you know what you're doing is sabotaging something you'd like to have, or when you know what you're doing is contraindicated in some way to the better aspect of your life, but you do it anyway. And why do we do that? We do that quite often because sometimes we've got these unconscious elements within ourselves where we have accepted that we don't somehow deserve the goodness of life. And those unconscious processes, unconscious means you're not really directly aware of them. They tend to stay active, and we do things, you say, God, later say, why did I do that, you know? Why did I waste that day? Or why did I say that thing to that person that hurt their feelings? It wasn't really something I wanted to do. Yet we do things so often, and we would say, if you sat down, if I got you up in the morning and I came to your house, don't worry, it's not going to happen. But if I came to your house and when you woke up, I was sitting there in a chair with a clipboard, and I was going to say, okay, before you do anything else, tell me what kind of day you want to have. I doubt that any of you would say, well, I'd like to be kind of okay through breakfast and then really screw up from that point forward. At lunch, I want to supersize myself into another size clothing. In the afternoon, I'm going to not go to the gym, even though I really think I should. I'm going to have an argument with my spouse at dinner, and then I'm going to pass out on the sofa at night. That's my ideal day. I doubt that anybody would say that, and yet that may be the way some of you spend your day, right? Or some people do. Again, not you, but people you know. Why do we do that? Why do we say we want one thing and do the other? And the answer is, again, because we've accepted ideas and beliefs that limit our capacity to realize not what we can get from the world around us, but how we can express what is already in us. Those 7 qualities, joy being the one we're talking about today. You know, we know children have the capacity for joy, but in 30 seconds, that kid can be screaming his head off. Right? It's not something that the child is consciously directing. The child's not saying, okay, let's see, I've been happy for 7 minutes. Let me get really pissed off at mom. No, it doesn't happen. It's just kind of the feelings drive it, right? But there is that capacity within all of us. We're born with this capacity for joy. We're born with the capacity to laugh and to relate in a positive way to other people. It's just part of us. It's part of who we are. So it's not something we have to create and bring in. It's something we have to learn to express more fully. So the qualities we talk about, these deep qualities, last week we talked about peace, the week before we talked about love, are qualities that we are, not even qualities that we have. They're qualities that we are, but somehow we learn not to express them as fully as we could. Part of growing up, part of it's being civilized. That's a little bit necessary, so we're not, behaving like 2-year-olds as adults unless we get elected to Congress. But we all do that to some extent, don't we? Don't you see a lot of sandbox behavior where you work, probably, Maybe in your house occasionally, definitely on the freeway. What is that? Why is that? Why do we fall into those lesser elements of ourselves that are not as deeply ingrained within us as the God qualities? Ernest Holmes said, my feelings cannot be, this is an affirmation by the way, my feelings cannot be hurt. No one wishes to harm me, and there is nothing in me that can believe in any separation from the all good. I perceive that I am free from all people, and I cannot be harmed nor mistreated. I have such a sense of unity with all that the circle is complete and perfect. I am filled with joy and love forever. Now, this is one of those nice little, you can even take just a sentence or two of this and say it into the mirror in the morning or into your rearview mirror while you're waiting in traffic and see if it resonates as true within you. You know, if you were to say, my life is wonderful, just say, you can say it to yourself, you probably just did. What did the little voice inside you, how did it respond? Did it say, yes it is, or did it say, oh yeah? Let's do an inventory. And then all the negative stuff comes up. I find about once a month I have what I call inventory night. I wake up sometime around 2 or 3 in the morning and spend about an hour or two taking inventory of all the stuff that's worrying me. And until the list is done, I can't go back to sleep, I find. So I just go through the list, and then what I do is I do treatment. I do prayer treatment about the list, and usually fall asleep doing that. See, if I just do the list, what I've done is affirmed the list. So what he's saying is, my feelings cannot be hurt. You know what? That's true. That's essentially true. Our feelings get hurt. We learn how to get our feelings hurt. You learned when you were a little child, all the way up into adulthood. When you're a little child, see, part of Maslow said we want to fit in. We want to be accepted within our little subculture. The family being the first one. So what's a good way to fit into your family? Get angry at what they get angry at. You learn how to get angry at, like daddy gets angry at something, and little boys beside him, damn, paper didn't come on time. Little boy can't read. I remember when I was, I've said this before, I remember when I was a police officer, and when I got hired down in Dade County, Florida, about 3 months after I got started on the job, they came out with a new accident report form for the state of Florida. Now, the accident report forms, if you've ever seen one, many of you may have copies of them in a file somewhere. It's about 500 boxes that you have to check different things, and it's just really complicated. And over time, as an officer, you get to kind of anticipate where everything is, and you can do it with less and less thought, and faster, right? So when they come out of a new form, it's the same information, but they moved all the boxes. And I looked around, but the cops that had been there a while were pissed off. I mean, oh my God. And I started to think, I started to notice myself wanting to get angry at it too. But see, I hadn't learned the old one. So I didn't have any grounds not to be angry at the first one. But there was a part of me that said, I probably ought to act like I'm angry because I want to be accepted. If I say, oh, what are you guys complaining about? They're going to get mad at me. So we learn quite often when to be upset, what to be upset about, how upset to be. Watch cable news. They'll tell you. You should be furious. Get on Facebook. Alert! You should be angry at this. Oh, okay. Unless it's somebody I know and it's on the other side, then I'm angry that they're putting it up. Then I should be angry. Right? But you're not born knowing how to get angry at stuff like that. You're not born caring about stuff like that. We learn over time, based on the subculture we're with, what to get angry at and what to be in joy about. When I was a kid, it was going on vacation unless you were my dad. He didn't like to go on vacation. He went on vacation to keep my mom happy. Didn't work, but that's where he went. So there was always in me this ambivalence that I want to be more like dad or more like mom when I wanted to go on vacation. But I knew when we went that he was going to complain the whole time except when he was drinking, because he could drink anywhere. So there was that dichotomy. And I didn't know at the time what was going on. I didn't recognize the dynamic. Looking back, you begin to understand. And see, that's the point. When you're growing up, learning what to get upset at and what to feel good about, you're not paying attention to the psychological dynamic that's going on within you. You don't recognize you might be denying a greater truth by accepting this new pattern of behavior. You're just trying to fit in. So we become adults and we've got all these patterns that are in us. And you might even move into another city and you still get upset at the same stuff you got upset at back home. Or you get upset that they don't have the stuff you used to get upset at back home. You know, back east they have, you know, whatever. It's kind of interesting. The great poet Rumi said, "Sorrow prepares you for joy. It violently sweeps everything out of your house so that new joy can find space to enter. It shakes the yellow leaves from the bough of your heart so that fresh green leaves can grow in their place. It pulls up the rotten roots so that new roots hidden beneath have some room to grow. Whatever sorrow shakes from your heart, far better things will take their place." See, there is that idea, again, of cause and effect, of the idea of yin and yang, the field of opposites, that when we exist in a field of duality, we exist in the field of opposites. Like, if there were no darkness, you wouldn't know light. If there were just 100% light, we'd all be blind. We couldn't see anything. There'd be nothing to distinguish. You see? So it's only by having the shadow or the darkness that you can appreciate the light. And sometimes it's only by experiencing sorrow, which is part of every life, that we can truly understand joy. If all you have is joy, it becomes meaningless. So joy is about recognizing the inner possibility to live life fully with meaning that leads to happiness. And if we don't understand the relationship between joy and sorrow, sometimes we just wallow in the sorrow. We feel defeated by it. We say, nothing good can come of this. This is the end. My life is over. Let's see. There's that face again, huh? When's the last time you looked like that? I'm talking about the expression, not the... When's the last time you had a moment of what we would call unbridled joy, of ecstasy? Orgasms aside. I'm sorry. But I'm happy for you. Just because you realized you were alive, or you walked outside and saw something, a child, a leaf, an ocean, and just for a moment, there's that joy. Where'd that come from? It didn't come from what you were looking at or listening to or experiencing. It came from within you, because for just that moment, you were arrested. And everything that blocked the joy from expressing opened up. Joseph Campbell talks about the idea of aesthetic arrest, the capacity of art or nature to pierce the soul, to pierce the psyche to a degree that all of the protections we've built in to keep us from expressing our deeper selves are temporarily removed. And he says a piece of art can sometimes do that, or nature can do that, and you just become outside, you go outside of yourself. You go beyond that normal operating system that we develop called our personality, which is designed to protect us from pain. Most of our psychological mechanism is designed to protect us from pain, to close us in, to seal us off. You see? And the problem with that is it also protects us from joy. If you build a fort, you know, it keeps out the bad guys, but it also keeps out the good guys. I was reading a quote the other day. It was a wonderful quote. It talked about the only way to live is to be vulnerable. If you decide you're not going to be vulnerable because you've been hurt, you might as well dig your grave, because your life is effectively over. Because nothing powerful can happen to anyone who isn't vulnerable. And we're afraid of our vulnerability, right? There's lots of companies that try to sell you products to keep you from being vulnerable. Because we're afraid if we're vulnerable, bad things can happen. But if you're vulnerable, good things can happen. See? And if you say, I'm going to close everything off, I'm eliminating both ends of the scale. And both ends of the scale is where the magic happens. Both at the great sorrow end and the great joy end. There was a little thing on Facebook, a little drawing, it said, your comfort zone. This little circle like this, and then a little dot out here, it said, where the magic happens. Which is almost always outside of our comfort zone. It's outside of what we've decided with our collective subconscious where we want to operate. What we want. We want to be secure. We want to be safe. We're conditioned to do that. There was a survey done some years ago, not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago now. It said the number one thing that Americans want is certainty. And the number two thing is uncertainty. I want my life, I want to know what's going to happen, but I want to be surprised. See? Now that kind of locks you in. Because for one thing, there is no certainty. Certainty is we think we're certain, but really we're not certain about anything. We're not certain, certain the sun will come up tomorrow. Well, the sun didn't come up today. The earth turned. The sun's just sitting where it is. But, quantum physics tells us it's possible that the sun won't show up tomorrow. That a series of quantum events could do away with it. Very, 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 very unlikely, so don't worry. People running out, oh my God, Dr. Jim said the sun may come out tomorrow. Not something to worry about, unless you really are looking for something to worry about. But it's not 100% certain that it will. So what if I made certainty a little less of a priority in my life? What would I have to do internally in order to allow that to be? Well, first of all, I'd have to be okay with, I'd have to increase my capacity to be okay with uncertainty, with ambiguity, with the gray areas. I'd have to be willing not to label people so quickly and decide who they are by initial encounters. Abraham Lincoln said, it's impossible to dislike someone unless you don't know them well enough. I have to be willing to open up and live in a mystery a little more, because you are living in a mystery. When you go to Disneyland and you get on those rides, there's a little track underneath. I hope I'm not disturbing anyone too much, but when you get on the ride, there's a little track, and the track takes you. It looks like you're going to hit the wall, but the track turns you, right? Well, that's the way we want our lives to be. We want to be surprised, but turn just in time. But sometimes the track isn't really there. What if you're going to Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and he said, sorry, there's no track today. So you're going to crash into the wall. You might say, well, I'm not getting on that ride. But what if you say, well, there might be a rail and there might not be, but it's half price? Well, in that case, how many of you go to the clearance bin at Albertsons and where the stuff is like 8 months old? I'll take a chance. It's only 10 cents. The serve-by date is like 1958, but it's cheap. So if I'm paying full price, I want it not to kill me, but for a discount, I'll take a chance. Now this is really long, but this is my favorite quote of all times by anyone. It's by George Bernard Shaw. It said, "This is the true joy of life, that being used for a purpose recognizing yourself as a mighty one, That being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Now again, I know this is none of you. This might be someone you've met. I am of the opinion that life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live it, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch, which I've got to hold up for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Now, I've been a selfish little clod of ailments and grievances from time to time in my life. You know, where you, why can't life be better? What's the matter with everybody in the world but me? Right? And it doesn't even have to be to a great extent. It can simply be giving up one moment of your solace because someone else says something that you want to find disturbing. It's the same thing. If I can't let other people have their own opinion without me deciding to get upset, I'm setting myself up to be very unhappy. Because you know what? Even people that I like have different opinions than me. Sometimes, many times, most of the time. About almost everything. About things I think are certain. When our ministers get together, it's amazing the range of opinion about not only what our philosophy is, but how we should teach it and things like that. It's like you'd think it would be very clear. The way I've decided seems like the most rational thing. Why don't everybody get on board? Because that's the nature of things, I guess. We think differently. And we may fall into various subcategories, but take any subcategory, and every individual there is slightly different than the one sitting beside them. And if I can't handle that, if I need people to agree with me, then I can't live in joy, because they're not gonna. It doesn't mean I don't follow what I think is important. It doesn't mean I don't speak my truth. It doesn't mean I don't do what I think I need to do in terms of creating a life with meaning. It just means I let everybody else have their own opinion, and that's okay. How many people have you given permission to upset you? Well, let's see. There's 7 billion on the planet. I've probably narrow it down to about 1 million. Right? Anybody who's driving in LA, you've given them permission to upset you. Anybody in the media, anybody your kids date, or your parents date, right? Not to mention your kids and your parents. Yeah. So what's the likelihood you're going to be upset multiple times in a given day? Because people have a different opinion of something than you do. You don't even have to have another opinion. Somebody can just say a word and you can get upset. Syria. Abortion. Obama. See? Some of you, you're hiding it well because you're making sure somebody might be watching. I'm internalizing it, which means I'm letting it eat at my insides, but I'm not letting anybody see I'm disturbed because he just said I shouldn't be. Now you're upset at me. But you're hiding it temporarily. You'll show it when the offering comes around. So here's my advice for today. Do more of what makes you happy. But pay attention to what makes you happy. Sometimes when we're in a bad place, when we're in a wounded place, what would make us happy is revenge, we think. What would make us happy is putting somebody else down. So the litmus test is my happiness based or predicated on making someone else wrong or making someone else feel bad? If so, I'm coming from the wrong place within me. I'm not coming from my wisdom or my joy or my love. I'm coming from something closer to the surface. It's just wounded. And I have some work to do. And if I clear up that woundedness, I can be happy so much more often, so much more easily, so much more lovingly and powerfully. We did our service weekend last weekend. On Saturday, some people were for the troops, some people were here. And my sense was that people were happy doing what they were doing. They were giving of themselves. They were giving up time. They were giving up energy. But it was incredibly pleasant to be here. People weren't saying, oh, God damn it, you know. There was none of that. It was done with a consciousness of love. It was done with something, I have something to contribute. I'm here to contribute it. And that makes me feel happy. To be doing something worthwhile out of myself is a surefire way to be happy. To have meaning in life. And yet sometimes when we feel wounded, we close off and we say, I'm not giving anything. I'm not giving till I get. Please see selfish little clod of ailments and grievances. Because that's what you're being in that moment. And it doesn't make you wrong. It simply means that you're not in a consciousness that serves you. I can't serve anyone else unless I serve myself. Virginia Nelson, for those of you who knew her, knew how to live a life of joy. She lived a life of service. She was continually on the lookout for someone that needed something. And she would organize groups, and it's amazing. And I'm not saying that's your path. See, this is the point. There isn't one path. If everybody was like Virginia, there'd be nobody to serve. There'd just be this high level of frustration. See, there has to be the complementary energy. So everybody, I'm not saying go out and imitate anybody. I'm saying find who you are and be that unapologetically and fully. And if other people don't like it, fine. Bless them. But if we hold it in and we deny ourselves to the world because we think we're not enough, or we think we've been cheated, or, you know, he done me wrong, then we become the ones in need. And hopefully there's a Virginia around when you need that person. So it's about finding meaning. More of what makes me happy. You know what makes every human being happy that's a healthy human being? Giving. Giving something. Giving of time, there's another Rumi poem that says you have to give in order to be a complete human being, and the person says, I don't have anything to give. You have your prayer. You have the capacity to listen to someone who needs to be listened to. You have the capacity maybe to give somebody a ride when they need a ride. You have the capacity to show up in a way that lets you give. And you know what happens when you give from an area where you feel insufficient? You gain in that area. The best way to heal an insufficiency is to give from that area. I don't feel loved, give love. The trick is to give it without attachment. I don't have enough money, I need to give something to somebody. Here's a nickel. I need to establish the flow. I don't feel like I have enough friends. Emerson said, if you want a friend, be a friend. We're here to serve. To serve not out of a sense of sacrifice, but to serve out of a sense of fullness. to realize our own fullness and to recognize that we all have enough of whatever it is, our gift is, to spill out onto everyone else. And as long as we don't realize that, we have war, we have conflict, we have all that stuff that's based on the idea that I don't have enough and the world has to give it to me. Whoop. Little preview of coming attractions. So in closing, a consciousness of joy is something you already have within you. It's fully expressed. There's nothing to add to it. The only thing is some of us have built kind of a dam near the top of our consciousness that keeps it from expressing. We've decided life needs to be a struggle. We've decided life needs to be difficult. We've decided people are jerks. And those stories are killing us, literally in some cases. Those stories are killing us. You know, the shooter in the Navy Yard, you have to specify because there's so many of them these days. The shooter in the Navy Yard heard voices. I hear voices, don't you? His voices gave him a story, had to be a story of fear and hatred and anger and upset. Now I wonder how different he was than the average person on the street in anything but degree. I wonder how many of us have violent thoughts. I wonder how many of us are angry inside. We're filled with rage. And we're filled with rage for one reason. We feel wounded. We feel cheated. We feel left out. We feel powerless. Because we believe some things that aren't true. Doesn't matter if it's true or not if you believe it, right? So our work is to set about living in truth. Our work is to deny anything that we know isn't true. And what we know isn't true is anything that doesn't serve us. Anything that isn't about love and wisdom and joy and peace and power and beauty and light. Those are the only truths that exist. And when we live from those truths more powerfully and more powerfully and more powerfully, our lives speak those truths. And others see them. And others are influenced, even if you don't know it. One of my nuns in 8th grade said, I want to be so prayed up that when I walk down the street, people are healed just by being in my presence. That's joy. Thank you, and namaste.